Napoleon Hill said that some men have learned to use the winds of adversity to sail their ship of life. And the 13th of the 17 success principles that we are working with in the series of lessons that we're doing on the science of success philosophy is the principle of learning how to turn adversity and defeat into success. How to find the incredible good that lies at the heart of every seeming or apparent defeat or troublesome situation in your life. Hill also said that defeat may be a stepping stone or a stumbling block according to the mental attitude in which one relates himself to it. The central theme of this principle is that every adversity carries with it the seed of an equivalent or greater benefit. And I know that when you first hear this statement, it sounds like it might be too good to be true, or perhaps it sounds like the speaker really does not know what he or she is talking about. But I think I'll be able to prove to you that the turning point in our lives begins in that moment in which we begin to understand the nature of events as they occur to us in our lives. And it's important to point out that success in the higher brackets of achievement usually are marked by some definite, outstanding defeat or failure. Mediocrity does not require defeat, because it is defeat. If one is living a mediocre life, you do not have to rise or fall very far. But the moment that you set a definite major goal or purpose in your life and begin to move into the experience of something that is larger than you have known in the past, you will, in that moment, guarantee that somewhere along the road that you were destined to follow, experience adversity. And most people don't like adversity. They don't like it. They resist it. They take it personally. And if you take adversity personally, if you apply resistance to adversity, if adversity brings out negative emotions and blaming, a feeling of injustice, or even guilt, then you will not be able to find the seed of the equivalent or greater good that lies in adversity, nor will you be able to understand the nature of adversity and the fact that adversity is our friend. All people who have accepted and experienced success as their goal have undergone defeat comparable with the scope of their success. Let me repeat that to you. All of the great successful people in life, without exception, have experienced defeat or failure at the level of their ultimate success. So if one wishes to be truly successful, then you can know that you will meet with what appears to be failure at that level. And while the circumstances of life are such that everyone must undergo a certain amount of temporary defeat, you can find great hope in the knowledge that every such defeat carries with it, in the circumstances of that defeat, an equivalent benefit. Now, this knowledge provides us with the means whereby we may modify our reactions to defeat by searching for the seed of an equivalent benefit. And it's very important to be able to walk along the road of life, living your experience as it comes to you, knowing that when defeat appears imminent, or if the day is only providing you with what appear to be some temporary inconveniences that you don't like, this means that you really are onto something big. Most people react as though they're onto something that that they really wish had not happened. When your tire goes flat on the expressway and you're in a hurry because you left late, and immediately you know that your plans are defeated in that moment, what's the normal reaction? You know what the normal reaction is. Well, suppose that in those moments you had trained yourself to believe that something wonderful was happening to you. And all you have to do is find it. It's there. It really is there. Without exception, there are no exceptions to this principle. No exceptions. And there's a part of our mind that says, oh, yes, there is. The thing that just happened to me is the exception. No, that is your opportunity to demonstrate a great benefit that is visible if the eye of the mind could only see it. And you can begin to see the good that's there the moment that you make your peace with adversity, defeat, inconvenience. Those conditions that are natural and normal, that happen to us regularly, that we usually react to with marked negativity. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, our strength grows out of our weakness. Not until we're pricked and stung and sorely shot at awakens the indignation which arms itself with secret forces. Indignation, let's change that word to strong feelings that light our fire. If we're living ordinary lives, we have no great commanding feelings. And it's when we begin to experience those pinpricks of life that we begin to awaken and experience the strong desires that are in us. And it's those desires coming alive that begin to push us forward in ways that we did not experience before. A great man is always willing to be little, he said. Whilst he sits on the cushion of advantages, he goes to sleep. When he's pushed, tormented, defeated, he has a chance to learn something. He has been put on his wits, on his manhood. He has gained facts, learned his ignorance. He is cured of the insanity of conceit, has got moderation and real skill. And these are some of the major benefits of defeat. Now, let us recognize that defeat does not promise the full-blown flower of benefit, but only the opportunity of an equivalent or greater good. The seed is there. Suppose that apparent defeat, temporary defeat occurs to you or me. And we say, oh, wonderful. I've been defeated. Now I think I'll sit here for a while and worry about it. I'll mull it over in my mind. I'll find out who is at fault. And if I wait here long enough, an equivalent or greater good will come into my life. Is that the principle? No, that's not the principle at all. Not at all. When defeat occurs, that might be the first reaction, but then our awakening understanding begins to teach us that the seed of the good must be recognized. It must be germinated, nurtured, cultivated by definiteness of purpose. And there must be an awakening fire of hope instead of the negativity that we've experienced in the past. Emerson said, the changes which break up the prosperity of men are advertisements of a nature whose law is growth. Evermore it is the order of nature to grow, and every soul is by his intrinsic necessity quitting his known system of things, its friends and home, and laws and faith. As the shellfish crawls out of its beautiful but stony case because it no longer contains its growth and slowly forms a new house. What Emerson was saying is that we live in a universe that, by its own nature, requires that we be like it. It's an expanding, growing, changing universe. We, if left to our own devices, would settle down and retire. It's part of our language. And life says, no. It keeps pushing on us, forcing us, sometimes against our will until we understand the nature of what's happening to us, until we become willing to continue on with this process of growth and to cooperate with it with enthusiasm and excitement. When we discover and accept that we are beings destined to grow, to demonstrate an inner magnificence that we have not yet fully comprehended, then, as Emerson says, it's true that every person in his lifetime begins to thank his faults. It's our faults that sometimes force us to change. It was interesting when I was in the same class this afternoon, I received a telephone call from a couple who have been longtime friends of mine from Austin, Texas. They wanted to call and say hello and let me know how well things were going and to tell me that Virgil had just been made vice president of his company, vice president in charge of their European and Asian branches. A very responsible international position for him. About 8 years ago, just before lunch one day, Gleva called me sobbing and crying because Virgil had just come home for lunch to let her know that he had lost his job. And I talked to him, and he was crying too. It was the worst thing that ever happened to him. And I said, Virgil, it is the best thing that ever happened to you. Contained within this temporary defeat is the seed of an equivalent or greater good. And he said, the heck you said. Wasn't exactly what he said, but it's close. I did my best to convince him, and he came to believe it, and he went into action. He's been practicing these principles in all of his affairs, and the result has been absolutely amazing. Napoleon Hill talks about a river of life that flows in the mind of every person. And he said the river is not imaginary, it's real. It exists in the power of human thought. It dwells in the mind of man, he says. And it's the one and only power over which human beings have been provided with full and complete right of unchallenged and unchallengeable control. And what he says is that there are people who find themselves on one side of this river of life, and on one side of it, it leads inexorably to failure. But if you can move yourself over into the other half, the other side of the stream, the same river that moves most people to defeat moves that person to success. The success side of the river of life is attainable through definiteness of purpose, applied faith, the mastermind principle practiced, and a willingness to go the extra mile. These are the big four of the 17 success principles. Now, attainment of this great cooperative power may be aided by the remaining principles of this philosophy, but the big four principles are those principles that really do connect us with the success side of the river of life. Hill said that a man is never a failure until he accepts defeat as permanent and quits trying. You have in your life, I'm sure, known many examples of people who were changed by adversity. Let me give you an example that Hill uses in his writings that's evidence that adversity may become a blessing, and it has to do with a farmer by the name of Milo C. Jones who operated a small farm near Fort Atkinson, Wisconsin, a number of years ago. Jones' physical health was good. He worked hard from daylight until dark. But in all of the early years of his life, he never was able to yield more than the bare necessities of life for himself or his family. Now, late in life, he was overtaken by double paralysis and was put to bed by relatives who believed him to be a hopeless invalid. They thought they would be caring for him for the rest of his life if he did live very much longer. And for the first weeks he remained in bed, unable to move a single muscle. He could not move one finger. People had to care for his every need, turn him several times during the course of the night. And all that he had left was his mind, the one great power he had drawn upon so rarely because he had earned his living by the use of his brawn. Now, out of sheer necessity, he discovered that he did have a mind and began to draw upon it. And almost immediately when he began working with his mind, he discovered the seed of an equivalent benefit which was destined to compensate him for his misfortune. But the discovery did not come until he surrendered his negative emotions, until he let go of the sense of tragedy and blame. When he became quiet, peaceful, something began to happen inside his own mind. And that seed of an idea that came to him, in all probability, would never have occurred had he not experienced the adversity that seemed to rob him of a useful life. When the idea came, he turned to his family, who were his mastermind group. And he said, I can no longer work with my hands, so I have decided to work with my mind. And the rest of you will have to take the place of my hands. And what I want you to do is to plant every acre of our farm that can be spared in corn, and then start raising pigs with that corn and slaughter the pigs while they're young and tender. And then we will convert them to sausage. Let's call it little pig sausage. The family went to work as was directed, and in a very short time, little pig sausage was a household word throughout the nation. The Jones family became far richer than they had ever dreamed of becoming, and Milo C. Jones lived to see himself a multimillionaire, all his fortune earned on the same farm which previous to his misfortune had yielded him but a scant living. You see, he had switched from the failure side of the river of life to the success side of that great stream. And the change was made voluntarily with only the aid of the power of thought and, strangely enough, with a positive mental attitude in the midst of what most people were calling a tragedy. There are no tragedies unless we declare them to be so. But if you declare your situation to be tragic, then you will experience the consequences of tragedy, because that is your declaration. And contained within a tragedy, there is no seed of an equivalent of greater good. The tragedy must be converted to a positive mental attitude. Napoleon Hill said, when everyone else fails you in times of adversity, try depending on yourself, and you may discover hidden riches of fabulous value in your own mind power. Our great nation, with all of its riches and all of its freedom, is literally a product of temporary defeat. It was a form of defeat that awakened George Washington. You know that in his early military campaigns he was defeated time and time again, but he never quit. And he was destined to prove that temporary defeat is not of itself failure. He saw it as nothing more than inspiration to greater and more persistent effort. And then in the Battle of Yorktown, which was the turning of the tide of battle, he had his first real victory, and it was Lord Cornwallis' time to taste the bitter cup of defeat. And he went down under that defeat. And what a blessing to not only this nation, but to all mankind that he did. Because it was Cornwallis' defeat which gave birth to this great nation, which was destined in time to save Great Britain from annihilation in World War II. You see, Cornwallis' defeat contained within itself the seed of the greatest good that ever happened to Great Britain in World War II. If this nation had not found its freedom, Great Britain would have lost its freedom. And if you will look in your own personal life or the lives of the people that you know well, or the history of nations, of corporations, you will discover what I discovered in my own life, that the worst things that happen to us turn out to be the best things that happen to us. If we can meet that experience with a positive mental attitude, and also the awareness that a third silent party is always present in all our bargains. The nature and soul of things on this planet guarantees that anytime you make a contract, there is a third silent party present to that contract. And if you make a contract with defeat, you'll be defeated. But if you make your contract with life, if you believe that nothing can defeat you, then you will discover that God never takes anything away from anyone without replacing it with something better. Your own experience will prove this to you time and time again if you will observe it. But the history of mankind also proves that this statement is true. Defeat is of two types. And one is the sort of defeat which one experiences in connection with material things, the loss of money, the loss of a position, the loss of property, or opposition growing out of friction in human relationships, outer things. The other is defeat from within, where a person loses contact with the spiritual forces of his being, is overcome by discouragement, fear, worry, or anxiety, just gives up and quits trying. At the greatest moment of my life, I experienced defeat of both of those orders of defeat. I lost everything in my life that I had possessed or had held to be dear. And inside myself, I was defeated. I had lost contact with the spiritual forces of my being. I was so discouraged that I do not have words to tell you how discouraged I was. I lived with so much fear that there were moments when my body was catatonic. I could not move a muscle. I was like Milo Jones in the sense that, not that I had been injured, but my mind was so injured. Worry, anxiety. I was long, I think, beyond those states. There was nothing to worry about because there was no future in front of me. And I had given up and I'd stopped trying. And at that moment, a remarkable thing happened to me that perhaps has happened to you. I discovered that within me there is a spark of life, a spirit of life, that can never be defeated. And I found myself fanning the flame, that spark of life, and an incredible thing happened. I discovered, it was revealed to me, that my life, my whole life, could be as good as it was bad at that moment. Now that's some kind of good, friends. When you've got that kind of a seed planted, your life can really come alive. And at that time, I became so enthusiastic about life, about the possibilities that existed for me, that I was willing to go to any lengths to be changed and to have my life be what I had come to see that it could be. And it was at that point that I learned about some of the benefits of failure. One of the things that I learned was that failure breaks up the negative habit patterns that we have formed in our lives so that we can release our energies for a new start. When nothing is working, then you're free to start all over again. In the process of being defeated, there are times when we discover that even physical illness of the kind that Milo Jones experienced can become a blessing because we discover new dimensions of ourselves. If we've been depending upon our intellect, for example, we discover that there's another dimension of our mind. There's a spiritual dimension. That there really is an infinite intelligence that we can establish our own conscious contact with. Defeat has the effect of supplanting vanity and arrogance with humility. And it also gives us an opportunity to take self-inventory, to begin to look at ourselves, to see what has caused our defeat. If things are going pretty well for us, we do not examine ourselves. But temporary defeat will help us to take a good look at what the problem really is, and also defeat can help us to develop a greater sense of purpose or determination, a willingness to press on. We will decide that we're either going to quit or we really are going to make it. And most of us have never really decided to make it. Did you know that? Have you truly made a decision to go to any lengths to be successful in your life? Or has your life been something that has just been happening to you? Check it out, and it may be that you'll want to make that decision right now, right where you sit. Something else that defeat has a tendency to do is to break up undesirable relationships with other persons. I was talking to someone this afternoon about the fact that since he started his life all over again, he's discovered a number of people that no longer seem to fit in his life. They are those people that have caused him a lot of trouble all the time, except he did not recognize it before. And he has felt almost guilty about leaving them behind. But defeat separates us often from those very people who are liabilities rather than assets, and it's a very natural process. In Act 4 of Shakespeare's Julius Caesar is a passage that comes near to describing the negative application of the principle which this lesson is emphasizing. I'd like to share it with you. There's a tide in the affairs of men which, taken at the flood, leads on to fortune. Omitted, all the voyages of their life is bound in shallows and in misery. On such a full sea we are now afloat, and we must take the current when it serves or lose our venture. Fear and self-imposed limitations of the mind and the acceptance of temporary defeat as being final are among the stronger ties which cause us to be bound in shallows and in miseries. We are not bound by anything except our own negative imaginings. And it's important to know that these things that have bound us, that have tied us to circumstances that seem beyond our control, can be broken at any moment. They can be converted into benefits of priceless value simply by making a decision and going into action. The person who's discovered the source of his own mind power will not accept Shakespeare's poetic version that opportunity, neglected, may bind us in shallows and miseries throughout all the voyage of our lives. This would mean that you would have had one great major opportunity back there somewhere, and you missed it. You missed it, or him, or her. And having missed him or her or it, then your life is destined to be what it is now, living in the shallows. Not so. The voyage of your life can be broken up, modified, changed, and redirected to higher, nobler ends as often as you design. It would be fatalism to accept the theory that there's but one tide in the affairs of men which, taken at the flood, leads to fortune. The moment that we take possession of our own minds and begin to practice these principles of success in our lives, we discover that that tide is at its high point at that moment. Walter Malone, in his wonderful poem Opportunity, spoke to my heart that time of change. I'd like to share those words with you. This is opportunity, talking to you. They do me wrong who say I come no more, when once I knock and fail to find you in. Every day I stand outside your door and bid you wake and rise to fight and win. Wail not for precious chances passed away. Weep not for golden ages on the wane. Each night I burn the records of the day. At sunrise every soul is born again. Laugh like a boy at splendors that have sped. To vanished joys be blind and deaf and dumb. My judgments seal the dead past with its dead, but never bind a moment yet to come. I cannot tell you how consoling those words were to me, the time that I experienced what it appeared to be total defeat. Let me know that everything that had happened was for my greater good. And that I could sail on the high tide of the stream of life with an energy and with a power to achieve any and all things that I would accept as my new vision. Malone's version of defeat is the one which will be preferred by anyone who has truly come to believe that defeat carries with it the seed of an equivalent or a greater benefit. I know that it does. I also know that the American way of life is built upon a foundation consisting of these 17 principles of this philosophy. The Constitution of the United States was born of these principles. They guaranteed American liberty to all of us. But these principles also guarantee you the liberty and the freedom and the success and the opportunity to do and to achieve whatever it is that rises within your own mind and heart to achieve. You're not bound by the past, by the judgments of any other person or persons, or by anything except your own perceptions and your own judgments and the action that follow upon those judgments. You can become what you already are, because that's what you're destined to be. We can only do it, though, by practicing these principles, and as W. Clement Stone said when he stood here, do it now. Remembering what Napoleon Hill said, a kite flies against the wind, not with it. The 14th success principle is how to cultivate creative vision or creative imagination. Napoleon Hill said that all the breaks you need in life wait within your own imagination. Imagination is the workshop of your mind, capable of turning mind energy into accomplishment and wealth. He said that the imagination is literally the workshop wherein are fashioned all plans created by man. The impulse, the desire is given shape, form, and action through the aid of the imaginative faculty of the mind. Everything that you see now that exists upon this planet first became an idea in the mind of one and then of more persons, and there are no exceptions. Nothing has ever happened, nothing has ever been created by mankind on this planet unless it was first an idea. And that idea was something that was seen. The house in which you live was seen by the architect in his or her mind. And what that architect saw was put on paper and was called a blueprint and was seen with the mind of the contractor who built it. Everything that we have is first seen in our creative imagination. There are two activities of the imagination, the synthetic and the creative. And the first, or synthetic imagination, is that activity of that powerful faculty that rearranges old concepts, ideas, or plans into new combinations. This faculty creates nothing. It merely works with the material of existence or education and observation with which it is fed. It's the faculty used most by the inventor. Most inventors let their imagination work with what they already know, with what they understand, with what they can observe. And out of that imagining comes the new product, the new invention. Now, there's an exception to that, and that exception is the genius who draws upon the creative imagination. When he cannot solve his problem through synthetic imagination, through the first or most often used phase of imagination, then the genius goes to the next level, which is creative imagination, and through this faculty of imagining, the finite mind of man has direct communication with infinite intelligence. Perhaps you were here just a few days ago when W. Clement Stone, one of America's outstanding creative minds, said to us that he had established conscious contact with infinite intelligence, and he was telling us that the things that he had accomplished in his life were the result of that infinite intelligence working in him and through him. Is that statement too bold for you to accept or to believe? Is it? I believe that's exactly what has happened to W. Clement Stone. I believe that any person living on this planet can establish his or her own conscious contact with creative intelligence. But it can only happen when we begin to use our imagination in creative ways, and also when we couple our imagination with strong, positive emotions and desire. The great leaders of business or industry, finance, and the great artists, musicians, and poets, writers of all time have developed their faculty of imagination to the point that they have established their own conscious contact with infinite intelligence. Now, this is logical when you stop and think about it, particularly when you recognize that faith is the means of approach to infinite intelligence, and therefore the source of all knowledge and all facts, both great and small. And most of the creative persons that have changed the destiny of this earth have been men and women of great faith, great expectancy, great feeling. They have believed in what they were doing. They have gone into their projects with almost with an obsession to achieve and to accomplish. They believed that the result would happen, that success was there. An interesting thing happened this afternoon. I was making the notes for this class, looking in my book, Think and Grow Rich. I decided to pause for a moment and step out and get a cup of coffee. I did. I went to a nearby restaurant and purchased a newspaper that I did not intend to read, and opened it to a section that I did not intend to examine. And there my mind fell upon a column that pointed out that the top 10 business and economics paperback books for this month contain in that list Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Now, this book was published in 1937. It's still one of the best sellers, according to the Association of American Publishers, as of this date. I wonder if there was any connection between the fact that I was holding this book in my hand and making some notes from it, and picked up that newspaper and opened that page. Have you noticed that what you give your attention to, what your mind is focused on, seems to draw to you information about that subject, that idea? There is an infinite intelligence that works in things both great and small. To wit, there is no small, there is no great. What we see in our imagination comes back to us in the form of information of all kinds. In Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill tells a story that meant a great deal to me a number of years ago when I first read it. It was a story that was told to him by a person who was much loved as an educator and clergyman, the late Frank W. Gonzalez, who began his preaching career in the Stockyards region of Chicago. And I'm reading to you now what was written by Mr. Hill. While Dr. Gonzalez was going through college, he observed many defects in our education system, defects which he believed he could correct if he were the head of a college. He made up his mind to organize a new college in which he would carry out his ideas without being handicapped by orthodox methods of education. But he needed $1 million to put the project across. Where was he to lay his hands on so large a sum of money, which that many years ago really was a large sum of money? That was the question that absorbed most of this ambitious young preacher's thought, but he couldn't seem to make any progress. Now listen carefully. Every night he took that thought to bed with him. He got up with it in the morning. He took it with him everywhere he went. He turned it over and over in his mind until it became a consuming obsession with him. Have you noticed that most of us let our minds be obsessed with worries and fears? Let our negative emotions take charge of our minds, and we take them to bed with us, and we awaken with them. But not young Gonzalez. He had a definite, major purpose that became an obsession, and he had a burning desire. Now, he recognized that all who succeed in life must have a definite, major purpose as a starting point from which to begin. But he recognized, too, that definiteness of purpose takes action, animation, life and power in order to demonstrate. And that power must be backed by a burning desire to translate that purpose into its material equivalent. He knew these great truths, yet he did not know where or how to lay his hands on $1 million. And the natural procedure would have been to give up, to quit by saying, it's a good idea, but I just can't handle it. I can't get my hands on $1 million. That's exactly what most people would have done, but not Dr. Gonzalez. And so the story continues with that great man speaking. One Saturday afternoon, I sat in my room thinking of ways and means of raising the money to carry out my plans. For nearly 2 years I'd been thinking, but I had done nothing but think. I made up my mind. Listen carefully. I made up my mind then and there that I would get the necessary $1 million within a week. How? I was not concerned about that. The main thing of importance was the decision to get the money within a specified time. And I want to tell you that the moment I reached a definite decision to get the money, a strange feeling of assurance came over me such as I have never before experienced. Something inside me seemed to say, why didn't you reach that decision a long time ago? The money was waiting for you all the time. Let me ask you, are you vaguely hoping for your dreams to come true? You're just thinking about them? Or have you made a definite decision, an irreversible decision, that you will achieve, that you will acquire, you do not know how, but that you will come into possession of the fulfillment of your dreams? Well, things began to happen in a hurry. I called the newspaper and announced I would preach a sermon the following morning entitled, What I Would Do If I Had $1 Million. I went to work on the sermon immediately, but I must tell you frankly, the task was not difficult because I'd been preparing that sermon for 2 years. Long before midnight, I had finished the sermon. I went to bed and slept with a feeling of confidence. With a feeling of confidence. For I could see myself already in possession of the $1 million. His creative imagination had gone to work. He could see himself already having the $1 million. He could feel it. It was an accomplished fact in his mind. The decision was made. Next morning I arose early, read the sermon, then knelt on my knees and asked that my sermon might come to the attention of someone who would supply the money I needed. When I was praying, I again had that feeling of assurance that the money would be forthcoming. In my excitement, I walked out without my sermon and did not discover the oversight until I was in my pulpit and about ready to begin delivering it. Ah, adversity, right? Wrong. I did not have time to go back for my notes. And what a blessing that I could not go back. Instead, my own subconscious mind yielded the material I needed. When I arose to begin my sermon, I closed my eyes and spoke with all my heart and soul of my dreams. I not only talked to my audience, but I fancied myself talking to God. I told what I would do with $1 million if that amount were placed in my hands. I described the plans I had in mind for organizing a great educational institution where young people would learn to do practical things and at the same time develop their mind. At the same time, develop their mind. When I finished and sat down, a man slowly arose from his seat, about 3 rows from the rear, and made his way toward the pulpit. I wondered what he was going to do. He came into the pulpit, extended his hand, and said, "Reverend, I liked your sermon. I believe you can do everything you said you would if you had $1 million. To prove that I believe in you and your sermon, if you will come to my office tomorrow morning, I will give you the $1 million. My name is Philip D. Armour." Young Gonzalez went to Mr. Armour's office, and the $1 million was presented to him. And with that money, he founded the Armour Institute of Technology, now known as the Illinois Institute of Technology. Well, the necessary $1 million came as a result of an idea. But the idea was backed by a burning desire that triggered a creative imagination that saw himself in possession of his dream. Perhaps you were here last week when I stood exactly where I now am, with a bowl filled with dirt, soil. And I explained to you that that soil worked like the subjective mind of each one of us works. And in my other hands, I had packets of seeds that I emptied into the soil. And you understood that the soil could not fail to accept the seed. It could not choose the seed that it would germinate or grow. And I explained to you that thoughts are like seeds, that your dreams, your hopes, your aspirations, when planted in the soil, the subconscious mind must blossom, must come forth. Particularly if you can see them in advance, if you can see the seed already flowering. That was on Wednesday. Perhaps you were here 2 days later when this whole platform was covered with living plants from one side to the other. It was the season of the year in which we bring into this great sanctuary flower. I wonder if that was a coincidence, that example. But I also wonder if you and I could see as clearly in advance the garden that we have planted in our mind. We could see those seeds instantly becoming the living, flowering experiences that we have imagined. Would we too have the kinds of experiences that changed Dr. Gonzalez's life? And because his life was changed dramatically, he was able to bring great good into the lives of young men and women. I'm sure that it really works this way for us. Rufus Jones, who was a Quaker mystic, understood these things. He said, getting your imagination captured is almost the whole of life. The minute the eyes of your heart are enlightened, the minute your imagination gives you the picture of your path, your goal, your aim, it is as good as done. The way to become the architect of your fate, the captain of your soul, is to have your imagination captured, to see inside your own mind the way your life will be, to feel it, to believe it, to taste it, to be willing to go to any lengths to achieve what you have seen, putting aside all things that are behind you and moving toward the mark that you have set, that you're destined good. If you will do it, you will discover that the whole universe, with all of its power, will respond. That's the way it really is.
This program is continued on the next cassette.